This is Russell Medley, and this is my Educational Leadership Module 8, Leading with a Moral Compass presentation. So in this assignment, we looked at different resources, and then in the first resource here with Moral Compass by Chido, a few things stood out to me. One quote I really liked was that if you don't have a compass, it's easy to get lost. And he talked about how kind of when you're hiking or going off on fisherman's trails, if you're not sure, if you don't have something to guide you, then it's easy to get lost, and kind of how that correlates with leadership. And if you don't really know where you stand on things and what your values are, then it's easy for you to get lost in your decision making process, and then kind of having those inconsistencies and things like that. People have to trust you. And one thing that he said that was that if you break trust, then you are done. And to me, that really stood out just because I have seen, in my roles and when I've had leaders, those that have broken my trust, and kind of in the back of your mind moving forward, you just kind of always come back to that. And so as a future building leader myself, that's something that I really want to think about, and making sure that I have a good grasp on where I stand and what my moral compass is, and further that I'm just being as consistent as I can in making decisions. And then kind of going into the next thing there is just finding that line that divides right and wrong. And that if you get close to the line in the wrong direction, it makes it easy to step over. But if you have a clear knowledge of what's right and what's wrong, then it makes it a lot more simpler. But if you do cross, then it just becomes easier to cross and maybe go further towards the wrong in the future. And another resource talks about having a moral compass by Bucaro. One thing he says that you need to know what your values are and what you believe before making a decision. Always putting people first in the decision-making process, respecting individual dignity, treating everyone fairly, and being honest are all important aspects of having that moral compass. And once again, just really important that knowing who you are and what you believe before making that decision is going to be so important. In the Encountering the Stranger resource, it talked about acting in the face of difference is not about knowing, but about understanding the other. And so sometimes when, I think we're all guilty of this, we make a decision thinking that we know how the opposite group feels, whether, it's by race, religion, and different viewpoints on the spectrum of the organizational values and things like that. But until we actually take the time to understand the other and kind of putting ourselves in their shoes, that will help us in making those decisions. It talked also about moral education should strive to teach pupils to understand the world from multiple perspectives. As an educator, I love this, and that's one thing I really took away from this assignment was finding ways, not only as a teacher but as a building leader, that kind of put our students in the driver's seat and making decisions, and having them working on developing their own moral compass, having them see the world through someone else's eyes. One thing I really like too is them talking about finding and talking with people who may have a different viewpoint than themselves, and kind of getting a better understanding of why they feel that way. Clarity was something that was mentioned, and that how an action must be delayed until clarity is achieved. So once you have all the facts, once you know who's involved, once you kind of know the pros and cons of the decisions, and how it's going to benefit or hurt somebody else, you have to just think about all those things and have clarity before making a decision. In the Concepts Unwrapped video, this is probably my favorite resource out of all the ones that were listed, just because it really did a good job of talking about how emotions can play into the decision-making process, and how we kind of have to combat those emotions with our moral compass. So they talked about how most moral judgments are based on emotions, and that makes it hard to rationalize when we are making those decisions based on emotions. There are self-conscious emotions such as guilt, shame, and embarrassment, and kind of how following the social norms on kind of what's acceptable motivates us so that we don't feel those self-conscious emotions. There's other condemning ones where we're motivated because if we don't make the right decision, then we would face anger, contempt, and disgust. So it might not even be that we make a decision because of how it aligns with our moral compass. We make a decision so that we don't feel, these other condemning emotions. People are more willing to make positive choices when they see others do the same. I believe there was a person in a car watching someone helping a lady across the road, and just by seeing that, kind of motivates us to make a positive choice because we've seen others doing it. I think this is really important with education, just where as a future building leader, if teachers are seeing me making positive choices and doing things that really align with my moral compass, then they're going to be more apt to do the same thing. And then that's just going to feed off with our students, and it's just kind of a snowball effect. It also talks about how empathy was the most important moral emotion, and then I also like the idea of mindfulness and that how we're really guilty of making decisions based off of our emotions, but if we can kind of take a step back, have that mindfulness to realize that and to kind of try and separate our emotions from it, see the big picture, that can help in overriding our automatic emotional response, um, just with thoughtful calculation. And some other resources on setting your moral compass true north. It talks about evaluating the possible benefits and harms of actions on stakeholders. So just making sure that you kind of, before making a decision, really sit down and think about who's this going to affect, how is it going to affect them, and that will help in kind of guiding you towards the correct decision. And then how actions are consistent with traits of behavior such as honesty, empathy, respectfulness, integrity, and responsibility. In The Search for a Moral Compass by Vanderwalt, it was talking about just the turmoil in South Africa and how there was a need for some citizenship education at a young age with students just to try and help reshape the morality of the country, and how at an early age, if we could reach out to those students and help them kind of start developing a moral compass on what's right and wrong, that it could help in turn kind of reshape their culture from where it's currently at. In The Moral Compass by Orchard, it talks about how one person's moral compass may not point in the same direction as another. And to me, that really stood out just because I think we all feel like we know what is right and wrong, and that what I feel is right should obviously be how someone else feels, but that might not always be the case. And that what we see in today's world is probably no different than what we've seen in any other time in history. We just got to have more information and more ways to access that information now than what we used to have. And so when I think about and see all the crazy things happening in our world and all the people on both sides of issues, I mean, really, there's probably always been that struggle, but we just kind of know more about it just with everything that's available today. And something that really stood out to me as well is that until society recognizes the need for a single absolute authority to distinguish between right and wrong, no possible solution or no solution will be possible. A lot of times we have our moralities based on religion or our experiences or our backgrounds, our cultures, and things like that. And while a lot of them have similar foundations, um, there is no just like one absolute distinguishing factor between right and wrong. And so, until that's done, it's we're always going to kind of have to wrestle with differences of opinions and arguing about what's the best decision for our country, for ourselves, whatever. In another article, Our Moral Compass, it talks about the values that guide us and how they're developed over our lifetime. So at an early age, we're influenced by our friends, our families, our role models, and which makes me just so much more passionate about that. Kids are so quick to just recite what their parents say, and especially with all the political stuff happening now and the viewpoints on COVID, it's so crazy to me as a teacher to hear what kids have to say and what they'll say, and I'll say, well, where did you hear that at? And they'll say, oh, that's what my dad says, and so it just seems like because that's what they're used to and that's who they're influenced by. It just seems like they automatically take on that mindset, and so I think it's just really important at an early age to try and create opportunities for students to think through scenarios or situations on their own and kind of have them think about how they would tackle those different problems and kind of developing their own moral compass. This article also talks about why we don't follow our moral compass. And this included because it may create more work for us. It might be in conflict with the organization and our supervisors wants, and that the benefits from choosing against our values, benefit us, but maybe don't align with what we truly believe. In another article, it talked with what is a moral compass and why you need one. It listed 5 reasons why you need a moral compass. This included it grounds your identity, it protects the greater good, increases our self confidence, allows us to be a good role model, and then foster healthy relationships. One thing I really liked as well is that it talks about how mistakes will happen, but having a moral compass will allow us to learn from our failings and to make better decisions in the future, which will hopefully strengthen our moral compass. So, just like a diet, there's going to be days where we're doing really good, but then we have a bad day. And if you kind of have that stability around you where you're able to get back on track, then that's hopefully gonna the next time you get off track, you have that background of I got off track from where I was, but I know that I can get back on track. I think the same applies to our moral compass. So in my kind of pictograph here, my own personal moral compass, I actually took an online quiz, Anthem, Anthemum 2017 there, had a quiz that you went through different scenarios and how you'd answer kind of how you would respond in different situations and kind of what you value and things like this. And it kind of really, I had to really stop and think on a lot of them just because I have an idea of what I want to do, but in some of the situations, I don't know if I always would have necessarily done kind of what I wanted to do. And so I tried to be as honest as I could. Luckily, it came out with this result that I was still pointing north. That just having a moral compass that points to the north is associated with purity, honesty, and empathy. I know that there is a clear difference between what is right and wrong, and that never hesitating when choosing between the two. You also try and do your best to do honorable things. So there's that. Here are my references. And then my correlation, this assignment correlated with the standards because I learned more about what a moral compass is and what makes up a moral compass. I had an idea of what a moral compass was, but after the readings, I was able to dive deeper into the benefits of a moral compass and how it can guide you into making decisions. Further, I took the moral compass test to reflect on where I personally stood and what I valued. And the relevancy, this assignment was relevant to my current learning because having a moral compass is something that I would hear a lot of. But taking the time to learn more about it made me think deeper into the use of a moral compass. It made me reflect on not only myself, my school, but also my community and what we see in the world and how things could be improved if only everyone had a moral compass in making decisions. I agreed with a lot that was said in the resources, and it really made me think about the importance of finding ways to reach kids at an early age in developing their own moral compass. In my reflection after going through this assignment, I took the time to reflect on what I valued and how I will make decisions with a moral compass in mind. In making decisions, I will stand firm in what I believe and not make exceptions that would lead me to go against my own moral compass. I want others that I lead to have clarity on who I am as a leader and know that when I make a decision, I am doing what is fair, that I have thought about the consequences and benefits to those who are involved, and that the decision I make aligns with not only the core values of the organizational school, but my own personal values as well. Further, this assignment made me want to encourage teachers and staff to have consistent activities that encourage students to think through problems and come up with their own solutions to help develop their own moral compass. This, in turn, would hopefully prepare them to be independent decision makers who can work in harmony with those in the world who may have different ideas than their own. Thank you.